Hello, this is Cynthia Concordia from Dream to Rise, and I welcome each one of you because I consider this a special episode. We have a special guest who is an attorney and recipient of the Governor's Award for Advocacy with survivors of domestic violence, who triumphed over narcissistic abuse with 2 marriages to narcissists behind them. And they've harnessed and transformed power of emotional freedom technique to guide others on their path to healing and personal growth. And she's now prepared to be inspired by the journey of others and so on. And so without further ado, let us welcome Stephany Ann. Stephany, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your show, Cynthia. It is an honor to be here and to share my story.
Yes, and I'm glad that you responded to my post.
Yes, me too.
Because
Me too.
I really want to have those the guests who will be able to share their journey coming from their trauma and now evolving and progressing, helping others, spreading her light so others may benefit.
Yes.
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 So let's start, Stephany. Can you tell us something about yourself that brought you to where you are right now?
Yes. So, Cynthia, for years, I felt like I was living a completely different story through a lens of why me, and it's only recently that I feel like I've been able to break that pattern of calling people into my life through relationships that would teach me the lessons I still needed to learn about owning this as my story. I think for a lot of us who've been through really hard, painful struggles, it's hard for us to own our story because of the shame and the guilt that is wrapped up in our stories. And so for a really long time, I struggled to own my story. But now I've learned that I need to own my story, and it's not someone else's story, it's my story. And it's a story of healing those parts within me that had me feeling so unworthy of love, that I would call people back into my life that would reflect that back to me over and over again through their abusive words, through the criticisms, the critiques, through the feeling of never feeling like I'm enough, or through the ways that they would manipulate, twist my words, and distort my reality through gaslighting. But they would always show up as the exact teachers I needed. And I can say that now, although for a long time, I saw my past 2 marriages and the men who fit into this role as monsters out to destroy my life. And as I continue to ask, why me? When I look back, I wasn't happy. I was miserable. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And so sometimes I think maybe there was a part of me, and maybe there's a part of us that is drawn into the drama, drawn into the story, drawn into the victimhood of what was happening to me versus me being able to see what was for me. And, it wasn't until after 17 years within these 2 marriages and my second marriage ending in violence, where I actually found myself going blind in my eyes. And, I had lost multiple homes. I lost a home in a house fire. I lost another house in a hurricane. I lost loved ones to COVID-19. I had a baby that was born with a very rare genetic disorder. You're just moving that over there. And I even had commit suicide and that.
Uh-huh.
And so, I was just sitting here in this literally in the rubble of my life, feeling like this mess, like everything had been done to me. Just going, God, why me? Why me? I didn't do anything wrong. I was a good wife. I was a good mother. I'm a good person. I did everything right, in the eyes of society. I went to college, I went to law school, all these things. And yet here my life was just this big mess, and I couldn't see what was happening to me. And so here's the thing. I think that in the moment of, me just sitting there crying out to God, what's happening with my eyes. And I really felt like maybe I wasn't seeing my story through the right lens. Maybe I wasn't seeing my story correctly. And so I think that there are times when God, spirit, source, the universe, whomever it is we connect with and resonate with, gives us moments in time where it's either through losing everything or through a physical manifestation like my eyes. If we give ourselves grace, then if we ask the right questions, we can see that there is truth manifesting all around us, crying out for us to pay attention to. And for me, it was so much that I physically couldn't see my story playing out in front of me because I needed to see it through a different lens. I needed to shift from the victim story and become the heroine of my own story. And, when I shifted that energy from my exes being monsters in my life to my exes being teachers in my life, I could start to see the lessons. And as I began to take my power back, I could see what needed to be healed. I could see what needed released. I could see where I needed more compassion. I could see where there needed forgiveness in my life. But ultimately, I could see that the patterns and the shifts in my story that I thought were my reality no longer were my reality. And so, as I look at so many women out there, and men too, because this does happen to men,
Yes, uh-huh.
it's a pattern of unworthiness. And sometimes it's so hard to see that in the initial stages of these relationships. With the honeymoon phase, and then the love bombing, and then the trauma bond. It's difficult to know what is happening until maybe we lose it all. And then we pause and we get still and we start asking the right questions. And sometimes for the very first time, we can actually shift that story from why me to for me. And for me, it was in that shift. I remember hearing that, that still, soft, intuitive voice that said, Stephany, it is done. You have shifted. You have shifted the pattern. You've broken the patterns. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I share my story, because it can happen for you also. It can happen for the listeners when we let go of the victim story, when we see the lessons, when we see our story clear enough that we can also say, it is done. I have shifted the patterns. And that is true freedom. And that's why I share my story.
I agree. You know what? I
Yeah.
agree with you. But let me ask you, when was that situation when you told yourself enough is enough? you were in this two narcissistic relationship, and probably in the second relationship, when was that time wherein enough is enough? I need to stand up and then defend myself and do what I want to do now.
Yeah, and my second marriage, thankfully it only lasted 4 years. I learned my lessons much quicker the second time around. But he went on a narcissistic rage, and I don't know if you know what that is or have ever
What up to
experienced.
what extent do they do? I mean,
So it was for him. So a narcissistic rage is like the equivalent of a full-grown adult-size toddler temper tantrum.
mhm.
And usually they say they last for about 5 days, but this one went on for about 3 weeks. And so it was in the middle of this rage where he was punching walls, slamming doors,
But was he
cursing
hitting
at
you?
everyone.
Was he hitting you?
He was not. It eventually got to that. So, and once I told him I was leaving, then it became violent.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
experienced that hit. I mean, that when he
Yeah.
hit you, and that
Oh,
was
yeah.
the time that, okay, it's
Yeah.
about time I have to leave you.
It was when after I told him I was leaving,
Okay.
and he became, so what happens is, so, and do you remember the old Greek myth of a narcissist? So he was this man who essentially fell in love with his own reflection.
Mm.
And so that's kind of the origins of narcissism.
Mhm.
And so a narcissist, they don't have to have all the traits. They only have to have like 5 of these traits to be diagnosed as a narcissist. But a narcissist has this grandiose sense of self-importance. They have these preoccupations with fantasies of unlimited power, success, wealth, beauty. They believe that they're so special, so uniquely special, that everyone wants to be like them and everyone wants to be them. They have a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement. But they lack empathy, and so it's like we all have some of these narcissistic traits, which are good because we should have, we want to be confident. We want to put ourselves out there, but we have compassion and empathy towards others, and we're not manipulating people. We're manipulating the situation to get what we need. And so, you have this person who is either in the community, super respected, well loved, charming. Everyone loves this person. How could this person even abuse you? They're so great. Look what all they've done in the church. Look how much they've given. Look at what they've done. But it's all for show. And what people, what even as myself, who was an attorney and I worked in domestic violence, was, a lot of narcissists, they're not physically abusive, but they're emotionally and psychologically abusive. And that's abuse. Cheating is abuse. Manipulating someone to get what you want, that's abusive. Toxic masculinity, that's abusive. And so go ahead.
Because I'm sure this type of people, they are very loving, they're very romantic, they try their best to win you. And then did you see any red flag while he was courting you, or while he was you're still in a Not
Yeah,
yet married.
so when I met I'll talk about my second husband.
Uh-huh.
So when I met him, it'd been a couple years since I had been out of divorce with my first husband, and I manifested him. I'm a great manifester. I made the list.
Of
I
what you want.
said, yeah, everything I wanted and everything I didn't want. So
Uh-huh.
I made the list, and I put it out there in the universe, and I met him a week later. He fit.
Oh,
He checked off every single thing on the list.
uh-huh.
And at this time, I didn't know anything about narcissism. And we met online,
Mm-hmm.
and he lived 3.5 hours away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I was doing everything right. Like, let's just really get to know each other. Well, you can't see a lot of red flags if you are just talking. So I didn't know his friends. I didn't know his family. I didn't really know his behavior. I took everything that he said as truth. And so when we did meet, after talking for a couple months, I was already in love with him.
So it was just the first stage, just chatting online or chatting?
There was just
Oh, really?
chatting. Yep. And
Oh,
so we would do FaceTime and other things. But I later on learned that I fell in love with myself because he was just mirroring me. And so what happens is you have the first initial stage, like you said, is the honeymoon stage
yeah.
of every relationship. When you're in a narcissistic relationship, it's very intense, it's very quick, it's very uh, everything that you would ever want in a person, this person becomes that. He loved that I was a strong, independent woman. He loved that I was an attorney. He loved that all my girlfriends are strong, independent, successful women. He loved the way I parented, the way I talked about my children. And he also, because we talked so much, and that's, I suppose that would be a red flag, is be careful of how much you are pouring into this person. He knew that my first husband spent 13 years cheating on me. He knew my insecurities, he knew my vulnerabilities.
Oh, so
And
he
so
discovered all your weaknesses
yes,
and
yes,
took
and this is
advantage
what
of
they
that.
do. Yes.
Ah,
So this is what they do. They become that person that you want to confide in
mm,
and tell
uh-huh.
everything, because he also told me that his ex-wife had affairs, and here he is, this victim and stuff. And so we could commiserate over it. Well, I
Mhm.
have since learned that his ex-wife did not have an affair with him, and he was very
Oh.
abusive with her. And so, it's like it's
But you were
hard
still
because
not, you were still not
I was
married.
still learning.
You
No,
were
no, we
still
weren't
learning.
married. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We're still, this was in the honeymoon phase of
Okay.
us getting to know each
Uh-huh.
other. And so that's the first phase.
So that was
Then
a
you
red
go,
flag already when you
well,
connected with the wife, the ex-wife.
that was years later.
Ah, years later. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it
you
wasn't
never
right away.
discovered this during the honeymoon stage.
No,
Oh
no.
my. Uh-huh.
And so this is why it's so these relationships are so hard, because you don't know you're in them
Uh-huh.
until it's too late.
Yeah.
And so the next stage after the honeymoon stage is the devaluation phase.
Uh-huh.
So this would be where they take their mask off a little bit and they start criticizing you. They start using all your insecurities against you. They start manipulating, and this is where the gaslighting begins.
So when do they show this signs in a
It
relationship,
is
right?
it is usually after they have you hooked. And
Oh,
I say hooked, meaning they
You're
know it would be
already
more
emotionally
difficult.
attached.
Exactly. You're
Ah,
emotionally attached. And so when they do come in with some criticism or some devaluation, they'll say it like, well, I'm just speaking my truth,
mm-hmm.
or I'm just saying it like it is. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings here.
Mm.
But although, he didn't always phrase it that way, but it was all of a sudden, my girlfriends were horrible, horrible people, and he didn't like them.
Oh,
It
you mentioned those
was,
things? That
yeah.
was
So this is the devaluation.
okay.
So, in the honeymoon, he loved all of this stuff. In the devaluation, he hates all of this stuff. Your friends are horrible people. They don't even have kids. They don't even do all this. They are, whatever political affiliation. He started hating my profession. All lawyers are horrible people. The law is so effed up. This is so,
Mm-hmm.
and so then it becomes confusing, because so then they'll have the devaluation phase, but then they'll come back with the love bombing. And so then
It's
the
when the
love
time
bombing,
wherein he will apologize. So I'm sorry for what I did and so on.
no, well, yes and no. They don't always apologize. And if they do apologize, they apologize because maybe they took the criticism too far or
Oh,
they got caught. It's
oh,
not because they're actually sorry for what they did.
okay. Oh
And so
my.
that's the big difference there. Um,
But then you saw all these signs even before marriage.
no, a lot of this came out after we got married.
Ah,
And so what happened was in 20, so we got married. We met and got married within the same year. Sorry, here's
okay, your baby.
I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm just gonna get that.
I'm trying to, I'm trying to,
He was supposed to be asleep by now.
okay.
Um, but no, so everything progresses really quickly in these relationships because they have to, like you said, um, whether it's the emotional hook or they're very quick to marry or get you pregnant, because then your chances of leaving are less likely.
Mhm.
And so I didn't really notice anything until we got married. And so we met and got married within the same year. And mind you, I had manifested him. And so when he says we are soulmates, meant to be together, God brought us together, it made sense to me because I had just manifested him.
Mhm.
Although in hindsight, I say I manifested him and then God gave me all the unlearned lessons.
Uh-huh.
And so when we got married, it was December 2019.
Uh-huh.
And then remember 2020, the world shut down.
Uh-huh.
And so this is when the mask came off and when he started the devaluation cycle. And so it was very, very confusing because it was hard to know what was the craziness of 2020 and what was really who he really is. Like, is he a violent person? Is he a manipulative and abusive person?
Especially during COVID, you always stay together. No
Oh,
other.
yeah.
Uh-huh. So you discover now a lot of behaviors. All this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Yep.
my.
And the gaslighting. And so if anyone doesn't know what gaslighting is when someone tries to distort your reality or your perception of an event. So
Oh
say
my.
maybe we had an argument the night before, and the next day I would say, hey, when we were talking last night, you kept doing this and this is how it made me feel. In a healthy relationship, you would bring this up. In a non-healthy relationship, the other person denies, deflects, tries to change your reality of what happened, minimizes it, or justifies it in some way. And so he started a lot of gaslighting. No, Stephany, it didn't happen like that. Oh, you're just too sensitive. You're taking things too literally. No, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And so it leaves you feeling extremely confused because you don't know what is the truth and what is not. And like I said, I mean, these guys are very charming. They're very good. They're master manipulators. They know what they are doing. And it just keeps you in confusion, because if you are constantly confused, it's a way that they can control you. They
Yeah.
can control you emotionally. They can control you psychologically. They can, and that's abuse. I mean, it's power and control.
Yes. So, this husband, or late ex-husband, was when did it happen? When you you saw that it's getting worse, and then you had to leave him.
Yeah, so it was when we were in Florida and he went on this narcissistic rage. We had been separated for about 8 months.
Oh,
Yeah, not intentionally. So what
separated
happened?
before you made the decision, first?
No, so what happened was we were moving to Florida.
Uh-huh.
His ex-wife had passed away from COVID,
Uh-huh.
and he had three little boys.
Uh-huh.
And so after she died, we decided to move to Florida because we all needed some sunshine and a fresh start,
Uh-huh.
is our thought.
So, and the
And
three
so
children stayed with you.
so at this time I had three kids, my two from a previous marriage, and then we shared a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and he had his three boys.
Yeah.
And so my first ex-husband agreed to us moving to Florida, and agreed all the way up until the night before we were supposed to leave, and then he filed a whole bunch of motions in court preventing us from moving. And so me and my three biological children stayed behind when him and his three biological children moved to Florida. So during this time that we were separated for 8 months, I continued to do a lot of more inner work and healing in my life. And so when my first ex-husband agreed that we could eventually move to Florida again, we moved there. And so when I got there, he was trying his usual tactics of his psychological and emotionally trying to get a response out of me, trying to control me that way and through the manipulation. And I just started ignoring
Okay.
and being firmer on my boundaries. And so about us being there for about 2 months, he could no longer control me. And after they no longer can control you with emotionally or psychologically, then they will move to physical violence to control you. And then they will discard you, which is a term used to end the relationship. And they usually end the relationship in a way that makes you look like the bad guy. They look like the victim.
Yeah.
Um, and so after he could no longer control me is when he went into his toddler temper tantrum, which is the narcissistic rage. And so he it was just out of the blue. It just started one day. It was very, very strange. And he just started slamming doors, stomping around, punching walls, doing everything to
Without any
provoke.
reason behind it?
Yeah, I have no
Insanity?
idea. It just like
Oh,
spontaneously
oh,
arose. And I call it, he turned into the Incredible Hulk, which
uh-huh.
other people who've seen narcissistic rage, they've said the same thing. It was the most terrifying thing I've
Uh,
ever
oh my.
experienced in my life. And it
Yes.
was during this 3 weeks of him raging where I told myself, I'm done.
Mm.
I'm not going to live like this. I'm not going to be involved in this relationship. I need to protect myself and my kids and get out of there.
So
And
you just
so,
left him. You just left.
well, it was, that was my plan. So I called one of my friends and I told her everything that was going on. And then I called his grandma because it was the only person that he actually respected. And I told her everything that was going on. And we all were trying to come up with a plan to get me and the boys out of there safely. Because at this point I had 6 boys, 15 and under, um, that I was very concerned for.
Mhm.
And so that was my plan. But because of the rage and the provoking, like it just wouldn't stop.
Mhm.
And just tormenting. He kept me up for days and days and days, just up almost all night, just shining his phone in my face, trying to record, trying to do anything to get a reaction because I
Mhm.
stopped giving reactions.
Yeah.
And then he just got worse and worse and worse and calling me every name that you could think of, kicking me off the bed, all of this stuff. And finally, one night, I climbed on top of him and punched him and said, "Oh, leave me alone. I'm
Oh,
done. I'm leaving." And he flipped me over and he said, "You're going to jail tonight, bitch."
oh my.
And then he destroyed my phone and basically kicked the shit out of me. And guess who went to jail that night?
Him. Oh, you?
Me.
You?
I did.
Did he call the police officer?
Hmm. Yep. After he completely like did, prevented me from leaving, blocked the doors, hit me, slapped me, punched, all of this stuff. And I finally got out and I went outside and he stayed in the house and he called the cops. And when I did get interviewed by the cops and I told them everything that happened, they never once, I was outside the whole time and it was probably 1 in the morning. And we don't have street lights in our on our street. So it was pretty dark. And they never took me inside to look over my body. They never really did the correct job of trying to find out who the primary aggressor was because most states have it's a mandatory arrest now, and the officers, their job really is just to find the primary aggressor. Well, I was beat up, but apparently I didn't look too bad, I guess, at the time. And he had blood. I don't
Oh,
know where the blood came from,
because
but
you punched him, no? You punched him.
oh, no, he punched himself.
Ah, he punched. Oh,
He
really?
cut himself. Yeah, and I know this because one of my nieces told me on a different occasion that he asked his oldest son to come beat him up and punch him in the face a few times. One time after I left
Oh
to
my.
because he thought I was going to call the cops on him, and so he was trying to get his backstory. And so after I had punched him, there wasn't blood. But you know, these guys are so savvy. Like it was all planned. And I had since found out he did this to his first wife. He put her in jail for the same thing. Like he provoked her. He went on a narcissistic rage, provoking, and provoking until she punched him, and then she went to jail.
Oh my.
And you know, it's like he is almost 6'4", huge guy. You think he's afraid of me? No. Do you think my punch did anything to him? No. But it was just, it was all a setup. And I have since everything's been dropped and all of that. But you know, this is what happens.
So now, the lesson you've learned, what lessons have you learned from this? Imagine.
So lots of lessons. Well, you know, when I lost my eyesight and I was sitting there just like crying, like what has happened here? Like I just couldn't get out. I didn't know what the lessons were. People are like, Stephany, what's the lessons? What's the lessons? There are no lessons because I'm the victim. I didn't do anything wrong. And I was stuck in that mindset for a very long time. Like you were sharing with me, you were stuck for a very long time. And until we become aware and until we release that old victim story,
yes,
we will stay stuck going nowhere.
So when
And so for me,
when did you gain that freedom?
yeah, so what I did when I realized that I needed to see my story through a different lens, you know, when I had this epiphany, I got out a journal and I said, okay, what if I look at the men in my life as teachers and not monsters? What can I say they taught me? And so I got a journal and I sat there and just one line at a time. My first husband, Josh, thank you for showing me that I need boundaries in my relationships. Thank you for showing me that I cannot be boundaries for another person. But I have to have my own boundaries. And then I could go to my second husband and say, thank you, Jace, for showing me that although I went into the marriage with boundaries, you kept pushing my boundaries and I kept pushing them back. So really, I didn't have boundaries. So then I could say, thank you, Jace. I need to be firm in my boundaries. And if anyone crosses one of my boundaries, we're done. I cannot move my boundaries for anyone. That's why it's called a boundary.
Yes.
I just had a movable fence. Sure. Yeah. It looks like a boundary, but we can put it over here. We can put it over here. We can put it anywhere, you know, like a little toddler playpen.
Yes.
That's was my boundaries. And so then I can go back and say, okay, Josh, thank you for showing me that I'm worthy of so much more. Jace, thank you. You have showed me that I deserve so much more, that I am worthy of so much more. And I like to say worthy instead of deserving, because deserving means like we had to do something in return. I deserve this because I did X, Y, Z. Worthy of something, it is innate in who we are. I'm worthy of a healthy relationship because of me, not because of anything I've done. And so, you know, I went back and I did that. I spent hours and hours. And once I was able to see the lessons, then I knew exactly what needed to be healed. I knew what needed to be released and let go. I was finally able to forgive these guys. And, you know, forgiveness, not everyone has their own opinion on forgiveness, you know, but forgiveness is for you.
Yes.
It is not for them.
Exactly.
And so I never wanted to be an angry, hateful, spiteful, bitter person.
Mhm.
But when I was stuck in my victim mindset, I could not forgive because I am the victim. I did nothing wrong. When I shifted that perspective and saw them as teachers and not monsters, then I could have compassion on them, and then I could forgive them.
Oh,
And so,
so that's those are great lessons for you, no? So this
yeah,
led you to become an advocate I mean, to stop domestic abuse, and this is what you're doing right now.
yeah. Well, you know, actually, I was an advocate a really long time ago.
Mm,
Uh, you know, so I've been an advocate for 20 plus years. What I didn't know was that I was in abusive relationships.
yes.
Um, you know, because it didn't, a narcissistic abuse doesn't always fit the domestic violence abuse
Mhm.
patterns and cycles, although it does and it doesn't.
Yes.
Uh, and so for me, I didn't know. And there's so many men and women out there who have found themselves in these relationships and they know something is not right
Mhm.
because it's all the psychological and emotional stuff,
Mhm. The manipulation
but
that they're
the
doing.
manipulation and the gaslighting. And so we don't always know what it is. And
Yes.
so now with me being able to talk about it and share my story and talk about narcissism and domestic violence, that no, it's the same. It helps people understand that one, it validates their experience, but also helps them understand what's going on in their relationships and if they need to leave their relationships. Because, like I said, it's sometimes it's so subtle
Uh-huh.
that unless you take a step back and see it in the totality,
Yeah.
you don't always know what's going on because it doesn't look like, you know, traditional domestic violence
Yeah.
because
Uh-huh.
they're not always being physically abusive. It's all the
Yeah.
little manipulations and the
Excellent.
gaslighting and
Yes. So
yeah.
so what are now your goals? What's or a goal or your goals in the next 12 months?
Yeah, so my goals right now is just continuing to share my story and raise awareness. I am working on a couple books right now
I
to share my story.
you should have you should have been included in my anthology book, Dream to
Oh,
Rise. Actually, it's going
yes.
to be released December 5. I was even looking for authors.
Oh, well, if you have time and
Yeah,
you want to shoot me something, maybe I can write something up real quick.
um, oh, I'll connect with you about this one after because I just have another interview, no? And I'll connect with you. And then
Yeah.
yes, and so
And
you want to you're working on a book?
uh-huh. And sharing my story and right now doing more healing work. So not with other people. I mentioned earlier that my first ex-husband committed suicide a month
Oh,
ago.
oh my.
And so, you know, I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. And so really I'm trying to take the time to focus on their healing and focus
Oh,
on them
oh
right
yes.
now.
You
And
need time.
so I'm not really working with people per se right now. I'm
Not
just
coaching.
no, I don't have the extra
Mm-hmm.
emotional space for it.
Uh-huh.
So right now just supporting my kids and being there for them and sharing my story and writing is where
Okay.
I'm at. So
Okay.
yeah, the next 12
Yes.
months, my goal is to have 2 books published, to speak on even bigger stages, and to have boys who are healthy and healing.
Yes. Thank you so much. Because I know you're not coaching, so I don't know how they could reach you, but I don't know if you're open to that. But anyway.
I can give you my
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn and I have my LinkedIn and I have Facebook.
Okay,
People
probably
can
you could
still
share
reach
it to,
out and follow me. Yep.
yeah, could you share with our listeners now? What are your,
Yeah.
you just look
Do I
for
just
Stephany?
put it in the chats or how do I?
You could just share it because it will be audio. They will be able to listen.
Oh, okay. So my and LinkedIn, it's Stephany Ann. I know I can give you the actual link and maybe you can put it somewhere.
Probably in our
And
chat messenger. Yeah.
yep. And then on Facebook, you can friend me, follow me on Facebook. It's Stephany Ann as well. And again, I will give you those links right now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stephany. And I pray that everything will turn out to be okay, especially what you're going through right now.
Thank you.
Anyway, you always, I think you have that prayer going on with God or the universe or to the ultimate power. It will
Yes.
give you that strength and hope. Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
having me on
so
your show,
much.
Cynthia.
Yeah, our story, the listeners are just waiting for our stories to be shared. And that's how they will resonate and they'll be inspired, be free from whatever chains they are in right now.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much. And to the listeners, thank you so much for being here with us. And again, till next episode. Thank you, Stephany.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.